Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's very special author talk between Elly Griffiths and Pekka Heino. We are so incredibly happy to have Elly Griffiths here tonight with us. She was supposed to be in Uppsala in September, but well, with this and that, and you know what, the pandemic, etc., we're all used to things being not quite as easy as they were. But we try to do the best we can, and Elly has kindly allowed us to interview her online instead. So we're so happy that we can do it this way instead. Tonight is very special for another reason as well, because this evening is the English Bookshop's 26th birthday, or 25+1 as we like to think of it, because last year, well, as I said, we get used to postponing things or doing things another way. So, a big happy birthday to us, the English Bookshop, and thank you everyone, all the customers, all the ones who join us online tonight, and all the authors who have done interviews and come and joined us for this and that. We couldn't have done this without you. You are wonderful. And to celebrate this, we have a very, very special draw. Well, we have a giveaway where you can win a signed Elly Griffiths book of your choice. Well, I picked Nighthawks because it's the latest one in the Ruth Galloway series, but you can pick any title you want. And also, you can win a gorgeous English Bookshop fancy bag. It's made of organic cotton and contains a surprising number of books and other things as well. Anything basically you want to take anywhere. To enter the draw, you have to be logged in either to Facebook or YouTube, whichever you're watching us through. And of course, this only goes for the live show, not if you're watching afterwards. But if you're watching live, you will be able to enter the draw with a special word that we will give you along the line. You won't be able to miss it, I promise. And we're doing this in cooperation with Uppsala Stadsbibliotek. So thank you, Uppsala Stadsbibliotek, for making this evening possible as well. We're so happy to do these online author interviews in collaboration with you. It's brilliant. And of course, you can buy books and have them personally signed by Elly. Just let us know whichever you want and how you want us, or rather her, to sign them. And everything should be hunky-dory, as long as we do get the book plates. Because you never know with, well, all sorts of snail mail. But it should be all right, I think. Oh, well, enough of me babbling. I am so chuffed, finally, to introduce to you Elly Griffiths and Pekka Heino. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And many, many happy returns of the day to the English Bookshop in Stockholm and Uppsala.
Right? Yeah, happy birthday.
And hello to you, my new favorite crime writer. I mean, really.
Oh, hello. Lovely to meet you.
And likewise, when I did my very first posting about this talk coming up, I had, you know, within seconds, I had dozens of messages from my followers who would say, "Oh, we love Elly, she's a favorite, and I can't wait for the next book." And so you got some really enthusiastic fans and avid readers here.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. Thank you. It's lovely to hear.
Yeah. And I'm sure they're all waiting so they can meet you in person, you know, when you can come here and have a face-to-face talk with your fans. Now, you work with something that in farmers' terms would be called crop rotation, because you have at least these two series. You have the Ruth Galloway series and then the Brighton series, and then there's the occasional standalone. And that sounds like a perfect way to work, really, because you sort of go between the series, the characters and environments, right?
Definitely. I mean, I think that it really does work for me. Of course, all writers are different. Just got my cat to the side of me here. You might hear in the shot.
Yeah. More than welcome.
It does work perfectly for me because, you know, I do a Ruth book and then I go to the Brighton series, which, you know, is set in the 1950s and 60s. So when I'm writing a Ruth book, I think, oh, I really, you know, I can't wait to be in that era in the 50s and 60s, especially because, you know, no DNA tests or tricky things like that, no internet, no mobile phones. It's quite a fun time to write. But when I am in kind of grey 1950s England, I think to myself, oh, I really want to be back with Ruth, you know. So it for me, it does keep them both fresh, I think. And I don't think Ruth would have carried on as long as it has if I hadn't had, you know, the Brighton series and the standalones as well, you know, writing about Hub and Decor and the South of England. So for me, it does keep them. And every Friday, just for my own fun, I write a chapter of my children's series.
Oh, yes. Exactly.
Because it just cheers me up. So, that's my little treat to myself.
Wonderful. Now that you mentioned, because I've talked to other crime writers who also have different series. David Baldacci is one, and he really enjoys, you know, taking himself and the characters out of today. You know, as you said, mobile phones, internet, everything. Just sort of get rid of it. Because it must be liberating in a sense. Do you agree?
It really is. I mean, because in some ways it's just easier for people to get lost, you know, and particularly writing about the world that I'm writing about, which is sort of theatricals. They move around a lot and you know, they can say, oh, what happened to the great Ray Deeney? Oh, I don't know. Whereas now you just Google them, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But now people can get lost and people can write letters that don't get there, and all that adds to it, really. And it's very nice for a crime writer to have that extra. I think if you do have the technology, you know, it's nice to use it. And of course that can itself sort of add to the tension, particularly with mobile phones or people knowing where you are, and that can be quite creepy. But it's also very nice to have, you know, even the police would have to walk to telephone boxes to call
exactly
people. And my detective, Meg, in the Brighton Mysteries, she's a working class girl living at home with her parents. They don't have a phone, you know. No. It's hard for us to imagine that, really.
That's right. And another thing that you just mentioned, you said that if you didn't have the Brighton series and the standalones, you might have gotten tired of Ruth. And I looked up an interview which was here in Sweden, I think, 4 books ago. You visited the crime festival on the island of Gotland. And then you said that you would write at least 3 books more. I think you're on number 4 and 5 coming up about Ruth. And then you might take a break because you would sort of wait for Kate to get a little older. Apparently, you're not there yet.
I'd forgotten I said that. Oh, my goodness. I love that so much. It was Gotland is so beautiful. I had such a great time. I think I did an event with Camilla Lackberg, and it was really fantastic. I had so much fun. Yes, I probably did say that. So so the Nighthawks is number 13. And I've just finished writing number 14, which is called The Locked Room, and is set during lockdown in 2020. And all I'm going to say now is that there'll be at least 1 more. But I do think that there will be a time when I do stop or at least pause. Yes. And it is, you know, I might just wait for Kate to grow up a bit and for the characters to grow up. But so I am seeing a bit of blue sky, you know, a bit of space. But this isn't the last one. There'll be at least 1 more after this.
All right. Let's move on to the books of this year. And I think we'll save Ruth Galloway. We'll start, you know, with the Brighton series. But first of all, I would like to go back to the Postscript Murders, which came out last year. And for those of you who are watching who haven't read it, I mean, you must do it. For me, it's really a book lover's crime novel. And it's a standalone, but even though you have some characters that you have written about before, but you would consider it a standalone, wouldn't you?
I would, yes, definitely, yes.
Yeah. Now, there were a couple of things. I mean, there are plenty of Anglophiles in Sweden. I mean, we've been brainwashed with TV series. My first recollection was, I mean, the Forsyte Saga in the 60s, Family at War in the 70s. So, and, you know, onwards to Downton Abbey and what have you. So we're very interested in all matters British. And there are a couple of things that sort of gave me food for thought in the Postscripts Murders, because you write, and I don't know if it's a character who thinks this. I don't think it's anyone who says it. But according to you, there's a police handbook where you're, as a police officer, you're encouraged to accept a cup of tea if you visit someone, either if it's a witness or it could be a suspect. But you visit them in their home. Maybe you're there to share some unfortunate, you know, tragic news. But if they ask you for a cup of tea, you should say yes. And why is that?
I do you know, I'm not sure where I picked this up. I do have a police advisor called Graham, who's very patient, I have to say, with me. He also advises Peter James, who, as you'll know, is another is very well known British writer and also lives in Brighton. So I know him quite well. He's a very nice guy. But he is so his police procedures are so completely accurate, and you know, you could almost use them as police training manuals. Me, not quite so much. So I don't know if I just made that up, but I think I did actually get it from a kind of a manual for if you're trying to sell people things, that if you go to the house, if they offer you something, you should say yes, because then it, you know, you're sort of, you've made that connection with them, that link with them. So I think that's probably where that came from. People drink a lot of tea in British novels, don't they? There's a lot of, and it allows you to have a bit of fun, you know, with I think Harbinder, who's the detective, her partner Neil has about 3 sugars in it, which just annoys me. And, you know, but I think maybe it makes people like him that he has that much sugar in it. So yes, you can do all sorts of things with a cup of tea. That's a very British thing to say, I know.
That's true. And another thing is that whenever you meet someone who's been to Cambridge to study, that is, they are sure to bring that up within the first 10 minutes of a conversation. Is this true?
Well, I don't know if that's true. It's a bit of a tease because both my editor and my agent went to Cambridge and I didn't. I went to King's College London, which is a very good university, but it's not the same in terms of showing off. So it might have been a bit of a tease, but people do, British people. So I might say to you, I read that when I was at university, and I just leave it at that. But if you went in Cambridge, you would say, I read that at Cambridge. Like, oh, did you? But funny enough, I teach at Cambridge now on a crime writing masters. And it's extraordinary because, you know, they've only taught English since 1930. English, they think, is quite shocking, you know, literature. And to think they're now teaching crime writing, that is very exciting to actually teach there. So maybe I'm going to start dropping that in conversation. When I was teaching at Cambridge. You know,
of course. You know, no, I can't make it. I'll be at Cambridge then, you know.
Yes, I know. I should. Yes, I'm a Cambridge John, you know, now. But one funny thing is, because, you know, obviously the Morse books are set in Oxford. And apparently when they came on television, there was a drop in people applying to Oxford because people thought it was so dangerous because there just so many murders there.
Oh, honestly. Well, it's like the Midsummer Murders. I know you talked about that in a different web talk, and it's very popular in Sweden. But, you know, and I used to be an announcer on television announcing, you know, and now it's time for the Midsummer Murders. And it was like, there can't be any people left in the village.
It's such a dangerous village. I mean, really. And never go to a village fete, because as soon as they have any sort of event, people are just dropping like flies, you know. And never talk to the local historian. They're always very dodgy. That's something else I've learned.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so on to the Brighton series. And last year's book was Now You See Them. It was set in Brighton, 1964. A girl gone missing from a boarding school. And there was the detective, Edgar Stevens, his wife, Emma, who also used to be a detective, but now had to settle with, was it 3 kids and taking care of their
Yes, 3, yes.
And there's Max Mephisto, former magician, now actor, and his daughter, a TV star. They all return in the midnight hour. And now we've moved to 1965. And I just love it. I love the nostalgia of Brighton in the 60s. And correct me if I'm wrong, but your grandfather has contributed to this particular story, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. In fact, just excuse me a second. I'm just gonna. I've got his picture. I've got his picture on my screen.
Oh, lovely! Wow.
So he was an actor, and he was called Dennis Laws. That was his stage name. And I just remember him very, very well. He had he fought in the First World War. He was a pilot in the First World War, and after that, he became sort of fairly famous as an actor and comedian. And when he died, he left me his playbills, and they just had these amazing names on them. Things like the great Ray Dini, the gay deceiver. Lou Lenny and her unrideable mule.
Unrideable.
Was that a real mule? Was it 2 people dressed as a mule? It's very hard. Dorothy and Brother. And you think, well, why does he have a name? So these amazing names on them. And that really, I just eventually wanted to write about these people in this world, because it's a vanished world, really. But Grandad would be on a different show in a different town every week. And he would just travel around the country, going to different theatres. And someday was changeover day, and they'd all sort of travel and go to the next place. And there were certain junctions, like there's one at Crewe in England, where they would all meet in the tea room and talk. And last week, in fact, I went to an event in Liverpool, and the train went through Crewe, and I really thought of Grandad sort of going there with his, with his boxes and cases. I mean, what a life! And in the early pages of the Midnight Hour, the new book, I do talk about that life, where they would just constantly be on the move, and they would see each other, and you'd be on the bill with so-and-so. Then you might not, talking about people sort of getting lost, then you might not see them again for years. So it's just a fascinating world to me, I have to say.
Yeah, I love that passage. I think it's a page where you really describe, exactly as you described it now, how they meet, and what have you been doing, and so on. And another interesting fact, since you brought that up, is like a star would have a dresser, and one would think that a dresser would just take care of the clothes and so on, but no, that entails much more.
It's a very interesting role, I think, because obviously you'd have to be quite successful to have a dresser, but they would just know all your secrets, and they would they'd be like a sort of personal assistant as well. They might plan your travel, but they'd be with you all the time. And in this book, yes, there's an ex-musical star called Verity Malone, and her dresser Alma is the woman who knows all about her, and it's a very, very intimate relationship, really. And she knows the secrets.
Yeah. So there's Verity Malone, still beautiful. Do we know her exact age in 1965? 80-ish?
Yeah, I think probably. I can't remember. I might have said. Do you know, the funny thing is that, of course, to us, increasingly to me as I get older, 70s doesn't seem old at all. But when you read sort of golden age books, as I often do, like sort of Agatha Christie, I remember reading one recently and said, "Oh, poor old thing. Yes, she had to go in old people's home while she was 60." And I think, God, that's so young. But I think Verity probably is in her late 70s. Yes, but she is very much still makes a big effort with her appearance. And I always remember my mum, obviously was brought up in this theatrical world. She always used to say, "You've got to make an effort for your public." Verity is very much that sort of person. That's right.
And she was in her heyday in the 20s. She was a music hall star and singer. And then she married Bert Billingham. And he gets killed off. I mean, is it already page 2? So, but he still sort of plays a role in the story. And he has this, I love the title, Theatrical Impresario. That just sort of, gives you a picture, doesn't it?
Yes, he does actually appear in some of the earlier books. He puts on the pantomime in Smoke and Mirrors, and so he is. You know, you have these figures who were very powerful, as Bert is, who put on the shows, who put the money to put the shows on, and they have a lot of power. And along the way, Bert has, I'm afraid, made quite a lot of enemies. So, as you say, killed quite early on, and and quite a lot of suspects.
Right. But the prime suspect being, which is not unusual, the one closest to him, Verity, and she's even accused by one of her 3 sons of killing their father.
Yes, she has 3 sons, and one does suspect her because he dies of poison sitting in his own armchair. And so Verity, because this is 1965 now, so she has started to read up about this strange American movement called women's liberation. Right. She's read Betty Friedan, the feminine mystique, and she wants a woman to clear her name. So that's how she ends up employing Emma, who is, as you say, Edgar's husband, and her friend Sam, who are now private detectives, to clear her name. So I thought it was interesting to start there, interesting to start with the women, and interesting to start with the thing, as you say, is the cat just going
hello
past
cat
me, off to just to start at that moment, because of course it usually is somebody close to somebody who is the killer, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so yes, you mentioned Emma and she and Sam, Samantha. They have started their detective bureau, but and it's interesting, you know, that they have the feminine point of view or the feminist point of view, because Emma, even though she has started this detective bureau with Sam, she still has to take care of the children and still has to take care of her home. I mean, Edgar is off, you know, doing his detecting, and then he suddenly ends up, you know, for some reason, to taking care of one of the children. It's like, what am I supposed to do with this? It's like, but it's really, I think it's really true for the time, the 60s, mid-60s.
I did really enjoy writing the scene where Edgar has to look after their baby, really. And he starts off thinking, you know, oh, this is going to be so easy. I'm going to take him to the park. We're going to have a great day. And by 10 o'clock, he's absolutely frazzled. So I did want to put that in. And it interests me. I often write about characters who have children. And sometimes I remember, you know, reading books where characters had children, yet they're sort of not there, you know, always conveniently somewhere else. But of course, you know, if you do have children, they do have to be there. Someone has to pick them up, and so you know, and quite often that person is the woman, and probably especially in the 60s. So Emma is quite frustrated because she was a brilliant detective. She's now a brilliant private eye, but you know, when she goes to interview some of these suspects, she has to take her baby with her, Jonathan, who is quite destructive. He's at that sort of destructive stage, so she's got to keep one eye on him, rather like I'm keeping one eye on the cat at the moment, you know, just knocking things over and sending things flying. And so I quite enjoy that. I enjoy having, you know, making that part of the story, really, you know. You know, the worry that you've got to pick up one of the children and all that. And I think it's possibly now maybe more, but there was a time when, you know, you never saw that in a film or a TV or in a book. So I like that.
Right. And you mentioned the young policewoman, Meg. She's in her 20s. And I really enjoy the connection between Verity and Meg through, as you mentioned, the book by Betty Friedan, The Feminine Mystique, which Meg gives to her. It's a bit too much of a read for her, so she gives it to her sister, who's an avid reader. So could you read and, you know, fill me in? What's it about?
Yeah, I really enjoy writing Meg. As I say, she's young, working class detective. She comes from near Brighton, in fact, very, very near me, Woodingdean, which is kind of the next place along. Rottingdean is where the book's set, and that really is very, very near me. So it's an area I know very well. You know, her family would have gone to schools that I would have gone to. So, you know, I do know them very well. And I just enjoy writing her because she's a character who is very intrepid and determined, but she does also feel herself as a bit of a social disadvantage. And Verity, this sort of aging star of the stage, really takes to to Meg, but Meg does notice that when she goes to see Verity, Verity does expect her to make the tea. We're back to tea again, Pekka. I don't know how we've done that.
Yes, you never get away from it.
I know, that you know you're talking to British writers, we're only talking about tea. But you know, feminism is all very well, but somebody's still got to make the tea, and it seems to still be Meg's job. So I did quite enjoy writing about that.
Yeah, and then we're not going to spoil the story more than that, because I mean the suspects, there's plenty of them, and the work goes on. But there's also the place, the house, the building where Verity and Bert live. It's called Tudor Close. It's built in the so-called mock Tudor style, and for those who don't exactly know what that would be, the department store Liberties off Regent Street in London, isn't that mock Tudor?
It is. It's almost more Tudor than Tudor, isn't it? It's endless bits of timber and, you know, diamond paned windows. Yes, it's a very interesting place. It's a real place. And it's near me, a little village. So I live in Saltdean, which is outside Brighton. And next place along is a very pretty village called Rottingdean. It's like a picture postcard, you know, and Kipling lived there. There's a beautiful old church, and Burne-Jones lived there. But I like a lot of these villages, a bit like Midsummer Murders. It's pretty that it's almost a little bit sinister. And behind the church, there is this house built in the 20s in sort of Tudor style. But in the 20s and 30s, it was a hotel. And it was quite a famous hotel. Cary Grant stayed there, Betty Davis, all the big stars. And there was, at the time, an entertainer, I think a pianist, who also put on entertainments there. And he had a little look around at the hotel, and he looked at the billiard room and the conservatory and the drawing room. And he thought, oh, I'll make a board game based on this house. And where you would have suspects, and they'd each have a weapon, and I'd put one in each room. So he made this board game, and he called it Murder Tudor Close. And
I want that for Christmas. Is it still available?
Well, no, because when he took it to Waddington's, they bought it, but they renamed it Cluedo. So that is Cluedo, but it started at this exact same hotel, Murder at Tudor Close. And somehow I found out about this. I think it was because it's now, so then it became private houses, several of them, so sort of divided into several houses. And I think one was for sale. And I saw this in our local paper, and I thought, oh, Murder at Tudor Close. That's where I'm going to start. So my book does start with an actual murder at Tudor Close, and it is a very interesting, fascinating place in this picture perfect village, which might not be so perfect after all.
Yeah. Now, finally, before we move on to Ruth Galloway, a few words about the Brighton Bell, please.
The Brighton Bell was a famous train, and I remember going on it. So I was born in '63, so I think I must have been about, so it was probably kept going till the 70s. So I remember going on it, and it was this most beautiful Pullman train, and it was very before its time at one time, because it was electric, and it was oh, the glamour of it. If you can imagine the glamour of it. Lovely little tables with little light shades, and people would bring you food, and it was just so lovely. I mean, I quite often go on trains, and they're nothing like that now. And also, it was very famous for being able to do London to Brighton in an hour, 60 minutes. You know what? Now you can barely do it in an hour, because Brighton is delayed. In fact, there's one train from Brighton to London. It's the 7:18 in the morning. In 1 year, it wasn't on time once. Not one day was this train ever on time. So, but in the 60s, I think maybe they were on time a bit more, but it was, the Brighton Bell was the most beautiful train, and I do remember going on it.
Yeah, I Googled it, and apparently there are some plans to restore it and to sort of use it again.
Oh, wouldn't that be lovely? It's just the romance of that sort of train travel. And I won't give too much away, but two of the characters in the book do go on the Brighton Bell. And it's just, you know, and Brighton then was such a, if you lived in London, and I remember when I lived in London, Brighton was the place you'd come for your holiday, or for your day by the sea. And it's that glamour, really.
Yeah. And of course, you know, before we leave Brighton for now, you do know that for Swedes above a certain age, Brighton means exactly one thing, which is
foreign language trips. No?
Well, maybe, but you know who's been all over the news in the past weeks? ABBA.
ABBA.
They won the Eurovision Song Contest in Brighton.
Did. At the Brighton Centre, and my friend's parents were there, and my parents could have gone but didn't. Can you imagine that? Really unbelievable.
And the UK gave us 0 points, so let's leave it at that.
But look at where the UK is now. You know, it's really not good in terms of Eurovision. But luckily, I'm half Italian, and Italy won this.
Well, good for you. You won the Eurovision.
I thought you were going to say, because a lot of my Swedish friends and Danish friends came to Brighton as language students.
Right.
And that's sort of how a lot of people remember it. And my Danish publisher is always saying that when she came to Brighton as a language student, she met a boy called Gary. And I'm always trying to find Gary for her. One day I'll find him.
Okay, enough Brighton for now. Now it's time for Ruth Galloway, and we'll start with last year's book, The Lantern Man. Then everything was suddenly up in the air. You know, a lot of things were new. She moved to Cambridge. And what else was new?
Yes, so she moved to Cambridge, and she had a new house and a new partner. She was living with Frank, who's appeared in some of the earlier books, and she and her daughter Kate and their cat Flint, who wasn't at all happy, had moved into Cambridge, and Ruth was working at Cambridge University.
Yes.
Kate had a new school, and it was the start of a new life for her. But I think it's not long. I think it's probably only chapter 2 before the sort of dark shadow of Nelson appears, and he turns up in this new life, and he needs Ruth's help in experiencing some bodies. So she's kind of, and the Lantern Men of the title refers to these. It's a legend of those parts, these sinister figures that appear on marshland or flat land at night, and you just see them carrying a lantern. But you should never follow that lantern, because you know you're doomed if you do. Really, but it's almost like a lantern that's leading Ruth back to her old life.
Oh yeah.
And there's I'm going to slightly open the door so the cat can go back, because he's making a noise. See? I knew that would happen. Yeah, you can go out now.
Let the cat out of the bag. Yes, and there's the blood-curdling villain, Ivor March. I just sort of, I don't know for what reason, I started thinking, did you come up with that name by putting Ivan Novello and Frederick March together or something like that? But never mind. He's a bit Hannibal Lecterish.
Who knows with names? In fact, there is a place in Cambridgeshire called Marsh, and I got it from the place. One of those places that's quite isolated but a bit sinister. Yes, he's the first time I've ever written about that sort of person. He's accused of being a serial killer. And it's the first time I've written about somebody who has that sort of I don't want to use the word charisma, but that sort of presence, evil presence. And it was the first time I had done that. And I wrote about Ruth goes to see him in prison, and I did visit a prison. In fact, to do some creative writing with the inmates, but I used that experience. I sort of built on that, which was an extraordinary, unforgettable experience, really.
And then there's something, before we move on to the new Ruth Galloway book, there's something completely different, because you have said in interviews that you don't do sex scenes because you prefer to leave that to the reader's imagination. But there is something, and I'm going to quote you, and I don't know if it's Ruth who's thinking this, or if it's the writer sort of, you know, describing Ruth's thoughts, but here is the quote. "Sex with Nelson is so good, it ruins sex with anyone else." End quote. Please elaborate.
Gosh, well, yeah, you found the sex quote in my books. Yeah. I think the thing is that, no, I would never describe a sex scene. I don't really like reading sort of the details. So I don't want to write them. And it's the same with violence. I don't want to write that either. But there is sex in the books. And I think even if we don't see it, we know it happens, and there are consequences to it. And I think it is one of the big things is that Nelson and Ruth are highly attracted to each other, and the sex is really good. And that is that because it's illicit? Maybe it is. I don't know, but it is certainly a point in the books. That is, because I remember one of the first Ruth book, which is called the Crossing Places. It won a prize in America, which of course I was very happy to win. But it was for something like, I can't remember, it's called the Mary Higgins Clark Award, and it's for a book, and it's something like for a book with a strong woman main character, but no sex or violence. And I did think, well, you know, it's a murder mystery, so and there is sex. You know, it is there, and it is important. So sex is important in the books, but you won't get a detailed description of it.
And this may be a spoiler to those. I mean, I'm sure most who are listening to us have read The Lantern Men, but those who haven't, this might be a spoiler that, as I said, you know, there were a lot of changes for Ruth in that book. But then coming to the Nighthawks, everything changes again.
Yes.
Do tell.
Everything changes again, and it is a bit of a spoiler, but I think you probably would guess that anyhow. She does come back to Norfolk, but now she has a new job in her old university, and that she's now the head of department. And that was quite important for me, that I wanted to make her professionally successful. You know, Ruth is a forensic archaeologist. She works at a university. She's very good at her job, and I wanted to show her being successful. But also, I also wanted to show, like with many jobs, you know, and I have good friends who are, you know, started off as university lecturers, but of course then you're successful, you get higher and higher, and you get new strains and stresses. And in Ruth's case, it's managing the staff, and she's got a very annoying new member of staff called David Brown in this book who drives her crazy. So I wanted to sort of do that, wanted to give her promotion because she deserves it, but also show that sometimes that has its own issues as well. So she's back in Norfolk. She's got a new job, and the attraction to Nelson's as strong as ever, I'm afraid.
And the cat is happy, and she has left Frank behind.
Yes, the cat is happy. Poor Frank. You know, when I brought Frank into the books, which I think was in The Outcast Dead, I did intend him to be a rival to Nelson in Ruth's mind and in everyone's mind, and I did everything I could to make him a very, I thought, attractive character. He's American. He is does TV shows. I keep telling you he's like George Clooney, but you know, for Ruth, he's not Nelson, and I'm afraid for me, in the end, he wasn't as good as Nelson. So Ruth is still drawn back to Nelson, I'm afraid.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. Now, speaking of Norfolk, I mean, it is a fascinating coastline, isn't it? I mean, it treasures galore. Really,
it really is. It's the most amazing place, really, and the reason, really, why I set the first book there and subsequently all the others is because I decided that Ruth would be an archaeologist. My husband's an archaeologist, so I sort of knew a little bit about that. Because there's so much archaeology in Norfolk, you know, it has been inhabited for a very, very long time. The oldest human footprints outside Africa were found in Norfolk in a place called Haysborough on the beach there, you know, and they are something like 800,000 years old. They're really, really old. So people have lived there a very long time. So you've got these layers. You've got Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, Roman. The Romans were there. They fought with Baldacci from Norfolk, Boudicca. So, you know, there are all these layers of it. Then in the Civil War raged in Norfolk, and the Second World War, there was always fear of invasion. And also, only 9,000 years ago, and this still kind of blows my mind to think this, only 9,000 years ago, it was still attached to Scandinavia. You could walk there. It's not that long ago, really.
Really?
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I mean, there was sort of the Ice Age sort of flowed, and sometimes it was more cut off than others, but only there was still a land bridge 9,000 years ago.
Well, there you go.
So this is why I feel so akin to my Scandinavian readers, because, you know, not that far.
And David, Ruth's colleague, I mean, he has one endearing quality. He used to live and work in Sweden.
Yes, he did. And married, had a Swedish wife and a half Swedish child. Yes, so yes. He has some very good qualities. He might even have gone to Uppsala University. I think he did. I think
probably.
Yes.
That would be the equivalent of going to Cambridge.
Well, exactly, and also very, very renowned for archaeology, isn't it?
Yes,
so,
yes, yes.
It would make sense, yes.
Yes, yes. Now, the title, the Nighthawks, I mean, the term Nighthawks, it has several meanings, doesn't it?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
And in Britain, it's sometimes used as a derogatory term, really, for metal detectorists, people who use metal detectors to go and find treasure, really. But Nighthawks is a name given to the people who go to archaeological sites and take things. So I thought it was just a fascinating phrase, because actually it's a beautiful phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the group of metal detectorists in my book starts with them on a Norfolk beach, finding a body, but also finding some treasure as well. They want to reclaim the name because they think it's a good thing. So they're actually quite legitimate, and most, hasten to say, most metal detectorists are. You know, they find some amazing things and they report them, and you know, these things end up in museums and everything. But this lot are a little bit dodgy. So I thought it was it's, you know, sometimes with books, you know, and I've now written 23 books as Elly Griffiths. Sometimes I have the title right up, like with The Outcast Dead and The Ghost Fields and with The Nighthawks. I knew that's what I was going to call it. Other times you do struggle for a title, but I always knew I would call a book that.
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting. And they find, as you said, they discover one body, and you can tell that this young man has died recently. But then Ruth is brought to the site, and another body emerges. Yes.
So Ruth, they find this body on the beach, and they think, in fact, that it might be an asylum seeker, because, you know, obviously it's often in the news that refugees come to Britain over the Channel, and often in sort of desperate need and on these unseaworthy boats, and very sadly people do drown. So that's what they think that this man is at first, and but actually he turns out to be local, and his death is then linked to another couple of deaths at a farm called Black Dog Farm,
right,
where there's an apparent murder-suicide. And this Black Dog Farm was owned by a doctor and his wife, and it looks like the doctor killed his wife and then shot himself. Right. But it's a very sinister place. And the more they start to investigate, the more questions they find, not least because it's called Black Dog Farm and is linked to a real, you know, as real as legends can be, a real Norfolk legend about a black dog who's called Black Shuck, who is this huge black hound with red eyes, who is meant to appear to you, well, it's not a good sign. If you see a big black dog with red eyes, it's not a good sign, and it means somebody's going to die. And I've been to, there's a church, actually it's in Suffolk on the Norfolk-Suffolk border. There's a church where you're meant to be able to see his claw marks on the church door. So I've seen that door myself.
It's fascinating with these legends. I mean, really, it's, and I don't think we should give away so much more of the story. I think that's pretty much enough. But there's one thing about Nelson, Harry. He has a first name, but everyone calls him Nelson. There's this talk about retirement, but he's only 51.
Yes. But yes, and so young. Yes, he's called Harry. Only his mother and his wife called him Harry. And his mum does come into this book. Well, it's in not that long ago. So my police advisor, Graham, he was chief superintendent of Brighton and Hove, and he is, to me, a young man of 58. And he retired about 8 years ago, because there was a rule that you had to retire after you'd done, I think it was something like 25 years service or something like that. So he had to retire, which was crazy, because with all that experience, you know, you would lose that. You would lose a policeman with all that. They have changed the rules since. So I said to Graham, you know, what would Nelson be thinking about retirement? And he said, well, they can't make him retire, but there would be a bit of pressure on him to retire, because you know, he's quite expensive, and he's maybe a bit set in his ways. And there would be a bit of pressure, and he maybe would overhear people saying, when's he going to retire? When's he going to go? So I wanted that to be a sort of tension, and it really, sort of in the British police force, I think I quote the actual rule. There used to be a rule that you had to retire after so many years service, which, as I say, I think was a bit crazy, because you lost very, very good police officers, you know, like Graham, really. And now Graham has a very good career advising crime writers.
Right. And another thing, how we get to know characters in novels, you know, on a general basis, but in crime novels as well, is through their relationships with other people, their family members. And here there's quite a bit of focus on Ruth's relationship with her dad. Tell us about that.
Yes, you know, it's one of the really nice things about writing a long series is that you can get round to the members of the family that you might not have got round to at first. So, you know, so this is book 13 in the series. So Ruth, early on, you learn that Ruth has a bit of a strained relationship with her parents. They're both sort of evangelical Christians. She's an atheist. There is that sort of tension. But her mum dies in I think in the Stone Circle, and now no the book before that, I think Chalk Pit, and now her dad is all she has left. So there's her relationship with her dad does come to the forefront in this book, and it was lovely to do that, and also a little bit about her relationship with her brother and her brother's relationship with the father, and how, you know, we've all sort of, a lot of us have been through this, how your relationship with your elderly parents sort of adjusts, and how it's sort of strange, that, not saying too much, that they have lives of their own. And funny enough, in the book that I've just finished, which is book 14, The Locked Room, even though Ruth's mother is dead, her relationship with her mother is in the forefront of this book. So it's fascinating, really, that you can keep digging into these families, and there are bits you haven't gone to. I was just thinking that although we've found out about Nelson's mother and his sisters before, we don't know very much about Judy's family. So it might be nice to bring them into another book. So this is why the series is going to go on and on, because I've still got loads of character relationships to explore.
That's right. Now, that's about it. You know, when it comes to my questions, the ones that I have prepared, it's been, I mean, I could go on for another hour, but we have promised our viewers a bit of a Q&A, and we have something here from Gunilla Nordin. Are there special Ruth Galloway walks in Norfolk?
Do you know, Gunilla, I think there should be. I think there should be, but there's nothing official. But I have been talking with my publishers about maybe writing a book about Ruth Galloway's Norfolk. So in that case, you would be able to, because most of the places in the books are real. So the book that I'm writing at the moment is set in Tombland, which is an area of Norwich, and that's real. King's Lynn is real. Walsingham, which is in The Woman in Blue, is a real place. So a lot of the places are real. Wells, where Cathbad lives, is real. So I think there could definitely be a Ruth Galloway walk. And one day there might be, but also one day there might be a book by me about, you know, Norfolk, and as we were just talking about with the Nighthawks, there are all these Norfolk legends as well, because I think possibly because, as we were saying earlier, it's been inhabited for so long. People live there a long time and they remember these stories, which just makes it such a wonderful place to visit, really. So do visit, do the walk.
And then we have Billy Reeves, Cormoran Strike from Twitter.
Oh, hi, Billy.
Familiar, yes. And he's wondering, and I've wondered about that too, how do you do the research for the Norfolk locations? Because I was thinking about, you know, you have Brighton, which is a bit closer where you live, but then you have Norfolk, and you do plenty of research.
Yes, I do. At first, I suppose what would happen was the books usually started with the place. And I've said before how the first Ruth book, The Crossing Places, started when we were visiting excuse me, a place called Titchwell Marsh on the North Norfolk coast. And Andy, my husband, who's an archaeologist, happened to say that prehistoric people thought marshland was sacred. Because it's neither land nor sea, but something in between. They thought of it actually as a bridge to the afterlife. Neither land nor sea, neither life nor death. And that in that instant gave me the idea for The Crossing Places. So it's usually the place that gives me the idea. So what happened at first was I would think of a place, think of an idea, and then we'd all go and stay there. And our kids are now grown up. They're twins and they're 23, but they remember loads of holidays in Norfolk. And I'm afraid to say they remember it always raining and you know, having to trek to these places because I wanted to write about them. So we always used to do that. But of course now, although not last year with COVID and all the restrictions that we had, what happens now is I'm invited to Norfolk anyhow to do talks and things like that, and to do tours, so I can combine the two. So when I'm there promoting one book, I can be researching the next one. So it all seems to fit in quite well, really. But at first, yes, at first I used to drag my poor family over the, and I think they should have been pleased because beautiful place. But Hunstanton, which is known to locals as Sunny Honey, because it's very sunny. Every time we went there, it rained. So the kids don't believe that it's ever sunny. But it is.
Did you at least bring your kids to Italy when you did research for
yes, you see, they've got nothing to complain about. And in fact, we do, because my family are Italian. My dad was Italian. So we do have a little apartment in Italy, which is the Dark Angels, kind of based on the little town where our apartment is. So yes, they do get to go to Italy as well. So they and they got to go to Blackpool when I wrote the Dying Fall. So they got nothing to complain about.
Billy also added that in a weird way he misses Phil.
Oh, Billy, how interesting. Now, the thing about Phil, so Phil was Ruth's boss, and as is often the case, maybe with your boss, she didn't always get on with him. And I always didn't get on with him, really, as a writer. But in The Lantern Men, there's a little bit, there's only about sort of 3 pages, that's from Phil's point of view. And it had to be that for the plot. And in it, Phil cycles home, and his partner Shona's having a dinner party. So he stops on the way to buy something for it, and he thinks, oh, I'll buy some After 8 mints, because that's what my mum used to do when people came to dinner. And you know, in that instant, I suddenly liked Phil. I suddenly really cared for him because I was writing his point of view, and I suddenly could see him as a child thinking, oh my goodness, these After 8 mints are so sophisticated, I must buy them. And I sort of got Phil for that minute. So it sort of did change. So I know exactly what you mean, Billy. I miss him too. It came too late.
Now, one final question. It comes from Anna Danielsson, and it's a huge question, but I'll quote it anyway. Where do you get your inspiration to all your stories?
Oh, Anna, what a good question. And what a... Writers are so different, aren't they? And I always love hearing fellow writers. I'm sure, you know, crime writers do tend to be very sort of friendly, actually, and we all get on very well. And I love hearing how other people get their ideas because they're all different. For me, it's often the place. So in Norfolk, it really is the place. It was going to, as I was just saying earlier, going to the marshland and thinking of it being the sort of sacred place. Another time I was driving across Norfolk and I passed these deserted airfield, and there was a pub nearby called the Hourglass. And I imagined sort of being, you know, there and flying out possibly to your death. And your local pub was called the Hourglass. So you could see the sands of time running out. Seemed very, very unfortunate, really. So that place gave me the idea for the ghost field. So it's often the place that gives me the gem of the idea. Also Walsingham, walking through the cathedral grounds at night and seeing a woman in a sort of purple robe and thinking, I wonder if she's a woman priest, I wonder if she's a woman bishop, which I don't think we had in the UK then. So it's those little encounters. Also sometimes, see, now the cat's come back after wanting to go on. He's come back.
Hello, cat.
Here he is, Gus. He's hello. And then sometimes, you know, as with my granddad's posters, it was the name, it was the word, you know, these Lou Lenny and her unrideable mule, sort of these little ideas. But I think even with Granddad, it was that idea, it was a sort of word picture that came into my head of this idea of these pros meeting up on the station platform, you know, the ventriloquists carrying their dummies and the people carrying all their equipment and just meeting up and chatting. So it's usually the place or some little picture that I have in my head of that contains the germ of the story, if that makes sense.
I am so going to steal that for a Halloween party sometime in the future. The unrideable mule. I mean,
well, if you do, Pekka, do send me a picture, because I mean, I don't know if anyone has ever seen Lou Lenny and her unrideable mule. I can send you the poster. I'd love to know. I'd love to know what it was all about.
Wonderful. Okay, let's bring back Stina. Before
there's just one. There's just one more
myself.
Question here,
Yes.
which says, "Any thoughts of a Cathbad spin-off book?" And
Right.
Christian, I have sometimes thought about that. I'm saying no more, but it's a very good idea.
I love Cathbad. I think I would be pretty annoyed with him, you know, in real life, but in the book, he's fine.
Yes, he's a useful character in fiction, but you might get a bit annoyed with him saying it's all part of the great web.
Yes, here comes the harbinger of death, and what have you. Thank you so much, Elly.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Stina.
Thank you both so much. I have enjoyed this interview immensely. I've been absolutely caught up and laughing aloud, and I'm not lucky enough to have a cat, but I've heard my dogs outside the door wondering, is she all right in there?
What's going on?
What's going on?
That's good.
Anyway, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I probably have about 1,000 questions to you, Elly, but thank you. And I know Pekka introduced you as one of his absolute favorite crime writer, and I must say that on behalf of the Bookshop, we are at least 3 of us who hail you as our very favorite too.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely.
Absolutely amazing.
Thank you. And happy birthday again.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, Pekka. Thank you, Elly. Thank you to Uppsala Stadsbibliotek. Again, our friendly neighbors across the street from the Uppsala Bookshop. And speaking of birthday, did you viewers all get the secret word to be in the raffle? And remember, you can win a book, an absolutely brilliant book, I must say. I read it about a month ago. And our lovely, lovely fancy bag. There we go. So,
do we know who won?
It's giveaway time. No, we're doing the draw now.
Oh, so, there's the word.
The secret word is, of course, Brighton.
Oh, it's exciting.
Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? Who's it going to
be? We're getting there. Oh, Nina Singhammer. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Nina.
Let us. The easiest way probably is for you to email the shop at uppsala@bookshop.se, and we'll arrange how you want to receive your winnings and what book you would like to receive as well. And of course, I think we'll ask Elly very kindly to give you a personal signature as well.
I'd love to do that, Nina. Yeah, just say the name you want in the book and I'm happy to sign it for you. So congratulations.
Thank you again. And thank you for tonight. We have another online event coming up in November. It's on Wednesday the 24th at 7 Swedish time. And at that time, it's Jen Campbell, another English author who has written poetry and short stories and children's stories. And we're really looking forward to that. So tune again at that time. Her latest book is a gruesome and wonderful children's story called The Sister Who Ate Her Brothers.
Oh.
I heartily recommend it.
Sounds great.
It's one of those, you read it and you sort of scare yourself. But join us then, by all means, Wednesday the 24th. And until then, thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.